Hey everyone, welcome to the video. If you're preparing for the CompTIA A Core 2 exam, you're in the right spot. In this session, we're going to go through a set of practice questions that cover key topics like operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and IT operational procedures. We are using skilltestpro for this test. It's a great resource with realistic questions that match the actual exam format, and so it helps you build real confidence. All right, let's dive in and see how many you can get right. All right, first question. We're actually going to start at question 21. A technician is troubleshooting a Linux system where a service fails to start due to a missing dependency. The system control status command shows dependency failed. Given a scenario involving Linux service management, what is the best next step? Is it restart the failed service using system control restart? Reinstall the service package using apt or yum? Clear the systemd journal with journal control flush? Modify the service file to ignore the dependency? Or check system control dependencies with system control list dependencies? The correct answer is check system control dependencies with system control list dependencies. A dependency failed error indicates a missing or failed dependent service. Using system control list dependencies identifies the issue for targeted troubleshooting. Restarting is ineffective, reinstalling is premature, journal flushing is irrelevant, and ignoring dependencies risks instability. All right, moving on to our next question. An administrator needs to configure a Windows Server 2022 system to allow remote desktop access only for a specific security group. Given a scenario involving securing Windows systems, what is the best method? Modify the remote desktop users group in computer management? Configure Windows Firewall to allow RDP only for group members? Edit group policy to restrict RDP access to the security group? Use PowerShell to set RDP permissions for the group? Or update the registry to limit RDP to the security group? The correct answer is edit group policy to restrict RDP access to the security group. Group policy, e.g. via gpedit.msc, allows precise control over RDP access by specifying allowed groups, ensuring security. The remote desktop users group is less granular. Firewalls can't filter by group, PowerShell is less standard, and registry edits are riskier. All right, moving on. A Windows 11 system displays a low disk space warning despite having sufficient free space on the C drive. Given a scenario involving Windows troubleshooting, what is the most likely cause and resolution? Is it system reserved partition full? Extend it using disk part? Temporary files accumulation? Clean them with disk cleanup? Hidden recovery partition full? Delete old recovery images? Incorrect disk quota settings? Adjust quotas and properties? Or corrupted file system? Run checkdisk/f to repair errors. The correct answer is temporary files accumulation. Clean them with disk cleanup. Low disk space warnings can result from temporary files, e.g. Windows Update cache, consuming space. Disk cleanup is the safest fix. System reserved or recovery partitions rarely trigger this. Quotas are user-specific, and file system corruption would show different symptoms. All right, moving on. A technician is troubleshooting a Linux system where a user cannot execute a script despite having read and write permissions. Given a scenario involving Linux permissions, what is the most likely cause and resolution? Is it missing execute permission? Add it using chmod plus x script.sh? SE Linux denying execution? Set the correct context with chcon? Incorrect shebang line? Update the script to use #!bin/bash? File system mounted as non-execute, remount with execute option? Or user not in sudoers, add user to sudoers for script execution? The correct answer is missing the execute permission. Add it using chmod plus x script.sh. Scripts require execute permission to run, which isn't granted by read or write permissions. Using chmod plus x adds it. SE Linux could be an issue, but it's less common. Shebang issues cause different errors. No execute mounts are rare, and sudoers is irrelevant for non-privileged scripts. All right, moving on. A macOS system user cannot access an application due to gatekeeper restrictions after downloading it from an unverified developer. Given a scenario involving macOS security, what is the most secure way to allow the application to run? Is it use SP control, add to whitelist the application in gatekeeper? Disable gatekeeper temporarily using sudo sp control, master-disable? Open the application via terminal with the xattr-d command? Modify system preferences to allow the app under security and AMP:privacy? Or re-download the application from the Mac App Store? The correct answer is modify system preferences to allow the app under security and privacy. macOS gatekeeper prompts allow users to permit unverified apps in system preferences, security, and privacy, which is the most secure and user-friendly method. SP control --add is complex. Disabling gatekeeper is risky. xattr-d removes quarantine, but it's less intuitive, and re-downloading may not be possible. All right, moving on to the next question. A user reports that a Windows 10 system cannot connect to a Wi-Fi network after a recent update. The network adapter shows no internet secured. Given a scenario involving troubleshooting connectivity, what is the most likely cause and resolution? Is it DHCP failure? Release and renew the IP address using ipconfig? Incorrect DNS settings? Configure Google DNS 8888 manually? Windows firewall blocking? Create an exception for Wi-Fi connections? Outdated Wi-Fi driver? Update the driver via device manager? Or corrupted network stack? Reset it using netsh winsock reset. The correct answer is outdated Wi-Fi driver. Update the driver via device manager. Post-update connectivity issues often stem from outdated or incompatible drivers. Updating the Wi-Fi driver is the most direct fix. DHCP issues would show different errors. DNS settings are secondary, firewall issues are unlikely, and resetting the network stack is a broader fix. All right, moving on. A Linux administrator needs to schedule a recurring task to back up var/log to a remote server every midnight. Given a scenario involving Linux administration, which tool and method are most appropriate? Is it use cron to schedule an rsync command to the remote server? Configure systemd timer to run a tar backup script? Set up anacron to copy logs using scp daily? Use @ to schedule a nightly cp command to the remote server? Or create a bash script with rclone and then schedule it via cron tab? The correct answer is use cron to schedule an rsync command to the remote server. Cron is the standard tool for scheduling recurring tasks, and rsync is efficient for remote backups, ensuring that only changed files are transferred. Systemd timers are more complex. Anacron is for non-continuous systems. AT is for one-time tasks, and rclone is less common than rsync for this purpose. Now, moving on to the next question. A Windows Server 2022 system experiences slow performance due to high disk I/O. Task Manager shows svchost.exe consuming significant resources. Well, given a scenario involving Windows troubleshooting, what is the best next step? Is it restart the server service to reset svchost.exe processes? Run sfc/scan now to check for corrupted system files? Use Resource Monitor to identify the specific service that is causing high I/O? Increase virtual memory allocation to reduce disk I/O? or disable Windows Update to prevent scvhost.exe activity. The correct answer is use Resource Monitor to identify the specific service causing high I/O. svchost.exe hosts multiple services, and Resource Monitor can pinpoint which service is causing high disk I/O for targeted troubleshooting. Restarting services is premature. sfc/scannow addresses corruption, not I/O. Virtual memory tweaks are secondary, and disabling updates is risky and unrelated. All right, next question. A technician needs to configure a dual boot system with Windows 11 and Ubuntu 24.04 on a UEFI-based machine. Given a scenario involving OS installation and setup, what is the critical step to ensure both OSs boot correctly? Is it install Ubuntu first, then Windows, and configure grub to manage both? Install Windows first, then Ubuntu, and let grub configure the boot order? Create separate EFI partitions for each OS during installation? Disable Secure Boot in UEFI to allow grub to load Ubuntu? Or use bcdedit to add Ubuntu to the Windows Boot Manager? The correct answer is install Windows first, then Ubuntu, and let grub configure the boot order. Installing Windows first allows Ubuntu's grub bootloader to detect and configure both OSs in the EFI boot order, ensuring compatibility. Installing Ubuntu first risks Windows overwriting grub. Separate EFI partitions are unnecessary, disabling Secure Boot may not be required, and bcdedit is less reliable for Linux. All right, moving on. A macOS Monterey system fails to install a critical security update, citing insufficient disk space. Given a scenario involving macOS troubleshooting, what is the best approach to resolve this while preserving user data? Is it use disk utility to resize the APFS container and free space? Run sudo purge to clear cached files and retry the update? Boot into recovery mode and reinstall macOS without formatting? Delete Time Machine snapshots using tmutil to reclaim space? Or offload user files to iCloud and remove them locally? The correct answer is delete Time Machine snapshots using tmutil to reclaim space. Time Machine snapshots often consume significant APFS space, preventing updates. Using tmutil to delete them is a targeted, non-destructive solution. Resizing containers is complex, purge clears minimal cache, reinstalling macOS is overkill, and iCloud offloading may not free up enough space. All right, you guys are doing great. Let's keep going. A user reports that a Windows 11 system cannot access a shared folder on a Linux server using SMB. The error indicates access denied. Given a scenario involving troubleshooting network shares, what is the most likely cause and resolution? Is it SMB v1 is disabled on the server? Enable SMB v2 or higher on the Linux server? Missing NTFS permissions? Apply correct share permissions on the Linux server? The firewall is blocking SMB ports. Open ports 445 and 139 on the client. Incompatible Samba configuration. Reconfigure smb.conf with guest access, or incorrect SMB credentials. Verify and update credentials in Windows Credential Manager. The correct answer is incorrect SMB credentials. Verify and update credentials in Windows Credential Manager. Access denied typically indicates incorrect credentials. Updating them in Windows Credential Manager resolves the issue. SMB v1 is deprecated and unlikely. NTFS permissions don't apply to Linux. Firewall issues would show different errors, and guest access is less secure and not the primary cause. All right, moving on. A technician is tasked with enabling BitLocker on a Windows 10 Pro system without a TPM chip. Given a scenario involving securing operating systems, what is the most secure method to enable BitLocker? Is it configure BitLocker with a startup key on a USB drive? Enable BitLocker using a password without TPM. Install a TPM module to support BitLocker encryption. Use EFS instead of BitLocker for non-TPM systems. Or modify group policy to bypass TPM requirements and use a PIN. The correct answer is configure BitLocker with a startup key on a USB drive. Without a TPM, BitLocker requires an external startup key, e.g. on a USB drive for secure encryption, as it ensures physical possession for unlocking. A password alone is less secure. Installing a TPM is unnecessary. EFS is file-based and not equivalent. And a PIN via group policy is less secure than a USB key. All right, moving on. A Linux server running CentOS 9 stream experiences high CPU usage due to a runaway process. Given a scenario involving Linux troubleshooting, which command provides the most detailed real-time information to identify and terminate the process? Is it use top to monitor processes and press K to kill the process? Execute htop to view processes and select the process to terminate? Run ps aux grep to locate the process and use kill 9? Use system monitor to analyze and stop the process? Or run isof to find the process and terminate it with pkill? The correct answer is execute htop to view processes and select the process to terminate. htop provides an interactive, detailed view of processes with CPU usage and allows termination via a menu, making it ideal for this scenario. Top is less user-friendly. PS requires additional steps. System monitor is GUI-based and not standard on servers. And ISOF is for file handles, not CPU usage. All right, moving on. An administrator needs to automate a backup process on a macOS Ventura system using Time Machine to an NFS share. Given a scenario involving macOS configurations, what is the correct approach to ensure compatibility? Is it mount the NFS share and select it directly in Time Machine preferences? Convert the NFS share to AFP for native Time Machine support? Use rsync instead of Time Machine for NFS compatibility? Configure Time Machine to use the NFS share via a custom sparse bundle? Or enable SMB on the NFS server and configure Time Machine to use it? The correct answer is configure Time Machine to use the NFS share via a custom sparse bundle. Time Machine supports NFS shares, but they require a sparse bundle image for compatibility, created manually and mounted before selection. Direct NFS selection isn't supported, AFP is deprecated, rsync bypasses Time Machine, and SMB is less reliable for this purpose. All right, moving on. A Windows 11 system fails to boot after a driver update, displaying a BSOD with a critical process died error. Given a scenario involving troubleshooting operating systems, what is the best initial step to resolve this? Is it run startup repair from the Windows recovery environment? Rebuild the BCD using BCD edit in the command prompt? Perform a system restore to a point before the update? Reset the PC while keeping files intact? Or boot into safe mode and roll back the driver using Device Manager? The correct answer is boot into safe mode and roll back the driver using Device Manager. A driver-related BSOD is best addressed by booting into safe mode, which loads minimal drivers, and then rolling back the problematic driver. This is the least invasive initial step. Startup repair may not address driver issues, BCD rebuilding is irrelevant, system restore is a broader fix, and resetting the PC risks data loss. All right, moving on. A technician is configuring a Linux workstation with Ubuntu 24.04 to restrict SSH access to a specific user group. Given a scenario involving securing Linux-based operating systems, what is the most secure and efficient method to achieve this? Is it modify etc/ssh/sshd_config with allow groups directive and then restart the SSH device? edit/etc/PASSWD to restrict SSH users and then reload the user database. Use IP tables to filter SSH by user group, save the firewall rules. Configure PAM to restrict SSH logins, update/etc/security/access.conf, or set up a cron job to monitor and kill unauthorized SSH sessions. The correct answer is modify /etc/ssh/sshd_config with allow groups directive, and then restart the SSH service. The allow groups directive in etc/ssh/sshd_config is the most secure and efficient way to restrict SSH access to a specific group, followed by restarting the SSH service, e.g. system control restart SSHD. The other options are less effective. etc/password doesn't control SSH access, IP tables cannot filter by group, PAM is overly complex for this, and cron jobs are inefficient and reactive. All right, moving on. A user reports that a Windows 10 system fails to apply group policy objects, or GPOs, after a recent domain join. The GP results/R command shows no policies applied. Given a scenario involving configuring and securing operating systems, what is the most likely cause and resolution? GPO inheritance blocked, resolved by enforcing the GPO at the domain level. Missing RSOP data, resolved by running group update/force to refresh policies. Incorrect DNS configuration, resolved by setting the domain controller as the primary DNS server. User account permissions issue, resolved by adding the user to the domain admins group. Or firewall blocking SMB, resolved by enabling file and printer sharing rules. The correct answer is incorrect DNS configuration, resolved by setting the domain controller as the primary DNS server. GPOs rely on DNS to locate domain controllers. If the client's DNS is misconfigured, it cannot resolve the domain controller, preventing GPO application. Setting the domain controller as the primary DNS resolves this. The other options are plausible, but incorrect. GPO inheritance issues would still show some policies. Group update refreshes but doesn't fix DNS. Elevating user permissions is unnecessary, and SMB is unrelated to GPO application. All right, next question. A company is deploying Windows 11 Enterprise via zero-touch deployment in a hybrid environment with legacy hardware. The process fails on some machines due to boot method incompatibilities. Given a scenario involving diverse OS installations, what is the most probable cause and resolution? Is it missing TPM 2.0, resolved by using a repair installation with bypass checks? Incompatible partition scheme, resolved by converting MBR to GPT via disk part? Network boot PXE failure, resolved by fallback to external hot swappable drives? Hardware compatibility list omission, resolved by updating the deployment image? Or legacy BIOS mode conflicts, resolved by enabling UEFI in the firmware settings? The correct answer is legacy BIOS mode conflicts, resolved by enabling UEFI in the firmware settings. Windows 11 requires UEFI for zero-touch deployments due to its secure boot and TPM 2.0 requirements. Legacy BIOS mode on older hardware causes boot failures, which can be resolved by enabling UEFI in the firmware. The second option is plausible but less likely, as TPM issues would typically cause different errors. The third option is incorrect, as MBR to GPT conversion is secondary to UEFI. And the fourth and fifth options misattribute the issue to network or image problems, which are less relevant here. Alrighty, we're almost there. Let's keep going. During a system audit, an IT administrator notices that a Linux server using XFS for its primary file system experiences performance degradation under heavy write loads compared to ext4. Given various file system types and their purposes, what advanced feature of XFS might be contributing to this, and how could it be mitigated? Is it XFS's journaling overhead, Mitigate by switching to REFS for better redundancy. XFS's lack of snapshots. Mitigate by implementing BTRFS for volume management. XFS's metadata checksums. Mitigate by disabling them via mkfs.xfs options. XFS's allocation group structure. Mitigate by optimizing with larger stripe sizes. Or XFS's extent-based allocation. Mitigate by defragmenting regularly with XFS_FSR. The correct answer is XFS's allocation group structure. Mitigate by optimizing with larger stripe sizes. XFS uses allocation groups for parallel I/O, but misalignment with hardware, e.g. RAID stripes, can degrade performance under heavy writes. Mitigation involves tuning stripe sizes during formatting or mount options. The first option is incorrect as XFS journaling is efficient and REFS is Windows specific. The third option is wrong as the snapshots are unrelated to write performance. The fourth and fifth options are plausible, but they're incorrect, as checksums and fragmentation are not the primary issues here. And finally, last question. A technician is troubleshooting a workstation that fails to mount an external drive formatted with APFS after connecting to a Windows 11 Pro system. The drive was previously used on a macOS device. Considering file system compatibility concerns between operating systems, what is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it Windows natively supports APFS but only in read-only mode without updates? APFS requires a third-party driver on Windows for read and write access? APFS is incompatible with Windows due to vendor lifecycle limitations on cross-OS support? The drive's APFS partition uses encryption that conflicts with Windows NTFS drivers. Or Windows requires reformatting APFS to XFAT for interoperability with macOS file systems. The correct answer is APFS requires a third-party driver on Windows for read-write access. Apple File System, or APFS, is designed for macOS and iOS iPad OS, and Windows lacks native support for it. A third-party driver, e.g. Paragon APFS for Windows, is needed for read-write access. The second option is incorrect, as Windows does not support APFS natively, even in read-only mode. The third and fourth options misattribute the issue to vendor limitations or encryption conflicts, though File Vault could complicate matters. And the fifth option is incorrect, as reformatting to XFAT would erase data and it isn't required for access. All right, and that is it for this round of Core 2 practice questions. Awesome job making it through, everybody. If you are serious about passing the A+ exam, then keep practicing and reviewing the areas that need more attention. I've added the link to skilltestpro in the description down below and in the first sticky comment so that you can try their full set of practice tests yourself. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep pushing forward. You're closer than you think.